Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brodie Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. She helps entrepreneurs grow conscious businesses that are purpose-driven and profitable. Best known for her edgy podcast, Conscious Business with the Corporate Yogi, Julie Zuzek is a highly sought-after business coach working with top entrepreneurs around the world. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brodie.
I imagine that a lot of the body-mind connection and mindfulness advice and coaching that you give to entrepreneurs could also really apply to pretty much anyone, regardless of where they work, correct?
Absolutely, because, one of my biggest messages is around personal growth. And, I always say your business won't grow until you do. And so that message of really focusing on what inner work you need to do in order to be more successful on the outside, I feel like that message applies to all of us, no matter where you are on your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's mindset. Tell me about your entrepreneurial journey and how that ties in with personal growth. I'd love to learn what you have learned along the way.
Yeah, that's a good place to start because a lot of my life over the last 5 years has been parallel learning. And sometimes I feel like I'm just one or two steps ahead of my clients and learning a lesson, and then I get to package it up and, pass it along to them. So for me, I had worked 15 years in corporate. And so since I had invested that time and really I was working in marketing and communications for technology companies. So I had learned how to build businesses and build a brand and do the practical bits of, creating a website and a logo and finding clients. And so I had been immersed in that for so long with so many different types of companies over the years. I assumed that when I stepped out to create it for myself, that it would be easy. And, we work with this stat that 90% of new businesses fail in the first 3 years. And I thought, I am completely going to bypass that. It's going to be easy for me because I come from this background. And, I really wish I could say it was, but it hasn't been. And the main reason is, I had the business knowledge, but it was the personal growth side of things that really called me forth to learn and show up in a bigger way.
And so what was that for you in terms of the personal, because I could imagine I've had my own business for 16 years and I've certainly discovered things along the way that some of it for me has been around boundaries. Some of it has been around issues with money, like that wanting to help everyone, but also needing to make a living. Some of it has been about recognizing who I'm supposed to work with and who I'm not and what my gifts are and really owning them and versus having somebody else come in and help out and shore up those. Obviously none of us has a totally well-rounded skill set, but I'm curious for you, you had all this background, you had all this experience, you had confidence in yourself. What was the issue? What was the hang up?
Well, you named some really great themes because everyone seems to have one or two themes that are really, really holding them back. And so that's my belief behind conscious business is what I teach. It's about looking on the inside to figure out what you have to learn to be successful on the outside. My specific themes weren't really, again, knowledge-based because I knew the practical side of things, but I had always sort of lived in the shadows. I didn't have to be, especially in technology, the background that I came from, being in a marketing capacity, we didn't have to be a talking head. I didn't have to do any of the external facing roles. So I could work really hard and do amazing things, but nobody knew who I was. Mm-hmm. And so I had this comfort of being behind the scenes and making everyone else look good. So, helping the salespeople, helping our service teams, and really make the company successful, but not being seen and heard at all. So my challenge was really stepping up into being a talking head for my business, for being my business, really. And I joke, sometimes I just did a whole podcast episode around self-promotion and how we have to step into that if we want to succeed. And the very first version, this is so embarrassing to confess, but the first version of my website didn't even have my photo on it. There was a tiny thumbnail image somewhere on the About page, but I wasn't on the homepage. It was hiding somewhere else, which I think is such a perfect reflection of how I thought I could approach this business.
Continue to hide in the background. like you had been doing is, yeah, it's pretty incompatible with, you kind of have to step into the spotlight in order to reach people.
Absolutely. And I've realized that now, and I have my picture on the homepage, but I had this whole story, and this is where the ego comes in, right? And it gets sneaky, and it creates this whole story and dialogue around how to justify why we don't need to do the things we're scary of. So my stories were, when I first launched, now I'm very much focused on working with entrepreneurs, which I love. But in the very beginning, I did a lot of corporate work. And so my website had a very conservative corporate feel to it. It was red and black and dark blues, and it was about building leadership cultures. And so I had this story around, I had to be a company for other people to see me and hire me in their companies. So that's how I sneakily got around it.
So you thought you were presenting something that you thought people wanted, as opposed to presenting something more reflective of you?
Exactly.
And is that what you mean by, like, words like authentic and conscious get kicked around a lot? And it's sort of like, so I guess one question for you is that helping people be authentic in the workplace, or to show up as themselves, to me, it feels like a big part of personal growth and is a whole kind of leadership philosophy. And I'm curious if that is, what can you tell me about authenticity in the workplace? And do you feel like that is a strength or even essential for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, and I love authenticity. It is one of my strongest, most favorite values. And it shows up in different ways. So for entrepreneurs, obviously, we are our brand, so we need to show up clearly, telling people who we are so that they can understand and be drawn to working with us. It's slightly different in the corporate environment, and at least this has been my experience because I was there. I did my time for 15 years, and what I learned is we get a very different lesson in the corporate environment. And I was taught from day one to, especially as a woman, and I don't know if you can relate to this message, but I was taught to be tough and be strong and never let people see you sweat. I mean, this is going, 20 years back. Authenticity wasn't a buzzword back then. And so I was taught very much to be powerful and strong. And if you want to succeed in a male-dominated environment, you have to demonstrate and model those male behaviors of being aggressive, of not having any character flaws, and being perfect and being confident whether you think you can or not. And you never admit that you're wrong. And so that was my experience in the very beginning. And that was something I carried through the bulk of my career. But what I've learned over the years is that even though we're in a corporate environment, and even though we have titles that really, I always like to throw out corporate personas, and that's really what we are showing up as in the corporate world, because we have a title and a job description that tells us who we need to be and how we need to show up and what our character traits are and our best used personality to fit a job. And so when we try to fit into a job and a role and fulfill a title, we end up being something we're not. And so I have observed and experienced that the corporate environment really evokes us into this place of being not authentic.
What you're saying really rings true. I haven't ever worked in a corporate environment, long ago temping, but the women that show up in my practice who are there for any variety of health reasons, that often coming back to stress and often coming back to like an incredible amount of pressure to do more than is humanly possible, and to really own, that kind of this expectation of like how to fit into a corporate environment where weakness is not allowed, where productivity is the maximum value, and where really it doesn't seem like anyone cares about work-life balance or about anything else. And the fear is, if I get enough sleep, or if I actually take lunch breaks, or if I stop eating in my car, or, like these various things that they know are contributing to whatever health concern is going on, that will be a setback professionally. And helping people see, so often as I sort of cheerlead for people's ability to draw those boundaries and to basically not enable their own abuse at the hands of corporations, to really actually do things differently, to give them confidence to do that. So much more often than not, they tell me how surprised they are by other people's support of drawing those boundaries, and that doing that enables other people to also be human. And, kind of in the language of Chinese medicine, it's bringing in the yin as opposed to the yang. And so just recognizing that, there's a space for the yin, the softness, the humanness, the everything that isn't productivity, that when we soften that tough exterior, that's often a really missing nutrient in the workplace.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, that's one of my favorite meta skills that I always teach my clients is modeling. And, if we want someone to give something to us, we have to give it to them. And quite often, if you can show up and have that vulnerable moment, that V-bomb, right? And really express to someone that you don't feel perfect, or you feel like you could have done more, or you're feeling inferior. 100% of the time, that other person is going to show up with their own personal example, and they're going to perceive that as a strength in you, not necessarily a weakness. And so in that moment, you are having all kinds of benefits happen, right? It's like a whole fireworks demonstration. So you are getting to let go of this expectation and this heaviness of trying to portray perfection, which we all know we're not on the inside. B, you're giving permission to this other person in front of you, whether it's a colleague or an employee or just a friend, for them to not be perfect either. But thirdly, and most importantly, you are inviting emotional connection, right? You're softening that emotional field, or what we talk about as the third entity, the relationship dynamic that exists between the two of you. And, if we can really focus on nurturing that, that's really what allows the workplace to be a much more enjoyable place to be.
Oh, I love that you brought in that term, the third entity. I've never heard it put that way. That in healing work, right, in the healing arts, the relationship between the patient and the practitioner is part of the healing process. And if you don't connect very well, it's one thing that could be on your side that isn't, if that relationship isn't solid. I love that notion that leading with vulnerability, right, like not being afraid to share that soft stuff, that softening of the field. The other person can feel that and be able to step into a softer, more human version of themselves as well. I love that.
Yeah. And let's be honest, it takes a lot of courage to do that. And quite often, and people ask me this all the time, of if I knew then what I knew now, would I have had the courage to do that in the corporate world? And part of me says yes, and part of me thinks no. I mean, could I have done it when I was 20? I don't think I would have had the courage to lead from this more enlightened place, or this servant leadership place. But I like to think that, once I had a little bit of experience under my belt, I could have. But, what I will say is, even though it does take a lot of courage, it's never let me down. So I will say that. So if you feel inspired to do it or to try it in a safe environment with someone who isn't a high risk relationship for you, and see what happens. And not only what you are observing in terms of sensations in your body, but also observe what's going on in the other person or in the group's body language. Are they feeling engaged? Are you seeing resonance on their face? Are you seeing this weight being lifted from their shoulder of, oh, okay, we're going to be real. We're going to let go of all the crap today,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to call out the word servant leadership. That stands out for me as well, which is actually, I think, how I unlocked a lot of my issues around even just sending email to people who have signed up to want to hear from me. It's like if I'm trying to offer a program or any of my courses, I still agonize and hand wring, like, am I offering enough value? Because I always want to be of service. And like my whole business is about serving. And actually having Post-it noted to the bulletin board above my desk, it's not selling, it's service. Like that needed to be there for like 2 years before it started to sink in. And just that. But anyway, that's a powerful mindset for people to unlock in terms of being able to promote themselves if their goals and their values are all about helping people. Because it's really not bothering them to help, to offer your knowledge and skill set to people that need it. It's kind of how it works.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I would tie this back to an earlier point that you made that was really quite brilliant in terms of the third entity. The relationship that you offer to people is part of accelerated healing for them. And so when you are sending out that communication or doing any sort of self-promotion, because we all struggle with self-promotion, right? Do they really need to hear from me again? Right? Think about you being in that place of, actually they do, because they know that I care when I'm acting from this place. And you're engaging in building that relationship with them. And it's the relationship, whether you're working with them in a direct sense or not, that is going to help them with their healing or get on the path at least.
Yeah. Well, and part of that too, part of that creating the right field for a business relationship or a professional relationship of any kind, for me, having a yoga practice and a meditation practice and a qigong practice or whatever sort of body mind practice is kind of I am connecting with at the time, that's how I start my day. And I feel like in order for me to get out of the way and hold space for other people and what's going on for them, it's like I need to have done that work in advance. And that enables me to be more present in the interaction that I'm having with someone and to not be, well, to be really in their experience and understanding it from a place that isn't colored so much with my own stuff. Because like you were saying, we all share a lot of the same struggles. And so being able to get outside of ourselves I feel like for me, is one of the keys to being able to be in the healing arts. Like, I don't know how I would do it without a practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that, you brought up the point, you start your day with that. For me, I do as well. And I actually top it up at noon because sometimes I feel even after a good 3 or 4 hours in my day, I need to tap out and I need a refresher. So, it's not a heavy yoga practice that I do at noon, but I'll do a little decadent restorative or go into a little bit of yin postures and do like a yoga nidra over lunch. So even just a 20-minute meditation lying there is a great recharge to go into the afternoon.
Yeah. For people who might not work from home, is there something that you advise them to do to help recharge? Like if maybe they don't have a lot of privacy, but do you have a go-to activity that you prescribe?
Yeah, well, just going for a mindful walk. I feel like I don't know about you, but I feel the environment that I'm in has always encouraged me to multitask. So going for a walk or running to the store without my earphones on and a podcast or without being able to check email, I mean, that just unheard of, right?
Podcast on 1.5 speed as I do.
10 minutes without a dedicated learning moment. I mean, that just feels selfish. So what I would say is just go for a really, really, really mindful walk. Don't carry anything. Don't listen to anything. Don't talk to anyone. Just walk and observe. Try to find a moment of love in others, or try to find something that is really special and unique and smiles, or just go out and walk across the street and find a way to help someone else, or give metta, love and energy to others as you're walking around. That can be a great way to take yourself outside of your own experiences and just give you perspective to focus on giving back to others.
So that sounds like an excellent antidote to multitasking, just going outside and moving with love in your heart. That sounds like an excellent meditation.
Yeah.
This episode of A Healthy Curiosity is brought to you by the coaching branch of BrodieWelch.com. Yes, that is me. In early 2017, I'm going to be opening up my schedule to coach just a handful of people one-on-one who are interested in showing up differently in the world. If you're wanting to feel more calm, confident, have more energy, ditch an old pattern, set a boundary, or change the one thing that you know will change everything, I would love to support you. Deep, transformative change can be hard, and it's way easier when you have someone in your corner who believes in you, who can amplify your strength, and who has lots of tools in her toolbox. If you'd like that person to be me, email me at Brodie@BrodieWelch.com. That's Brodie with an IE and Welch with a CH, and let me know that you're interested. Now back to today's show. When you talk about yoga, do you mainly mean the asana practice, or do you mean the other branches of yoga as well?
Yeah, this is a good question because everyone always just assumes that I do my coaching with my clients and we're doing yoga postures at the same time. It's not quite that literal. It is sort of taking the philosophy component to it and incorporating that into business. And I do that in a couple ways. So can I share a few of the principles that I bring forward?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, obviously, if we look at the 8 limbs, there's meditation that needs to happen throughout your practice to keep you, or throughout your day to keep you grounded, to allow you to connect to others, as well as active meditation and visualization to whether that's bringing more money into your life, bringing more clients, finding opportunities. we use those physical and metaphysical tools and techniques. And then the breath work, obviously, is really important. But then when we get into philosophy, the pieces that I really draw from the East, to me, are Dharma, having a very clearly defined purpose. Because whether you're starting your own business or you're working in an existing organization, you need to have purpose in your life. You need to be connected to that big why.
Oh, yeah.
Because we get so burnt out with the work sometimes and so distracted from what it is that we're doing. If you can come back to your big why, to your purpose, to who you are helping and serving, that really, really allows you to stay motivated. Because we've learned, money isn't the number one motivator.
Right. It isn't. There are studies around that, and that coming back to feeling like what you're doing has a greater purpose and that's in line somehow with who you are is so much more empowering. Like, that's the difference between feeling like a victim and feeling like you're in choice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and back to our earlier point about self-promotion, that was, this is one of the great tools that we always think about in terms of self-promotion, because we get in our head and we think, oh, can I really do this? What are people going to think of me? Do they need to have another email from me? We get in that questioning and that self-doubt mode. And so I always say, in those moments, connect back to your purpose, to your dharma, to who you are helping and what they need in that moment. And that helps you get through it, because it's not about you, it's about them. And if you can stay in that place of, servant leadership and focusing on what your gifts are and who you are helping and how much they need your help, then that helps us to get through whatever we're having a hang up doing that day.
Yeah. So I'm curious also how you help people discover their limiting beliefs. Because limiting beliefs is one of those things that, like, if we knew our blind spots, we'd be able to fix them, right?
Yeah, and this is such a great question. And you might not like the answer, but I just can. And I feel like it's a gift. I feel like part of it is practice, part of it is divine. And it's just something that I have when I'm talking to people about, well, this is where I want to be, but I can't because, it just takes that 2-minute conversation and I just know what it is, that the stories that they have in their mind, the things that they're doing wrong. And sometimes it is action, but quite more often than not, it is a belief. They are holding a limiting belief that's preventing them from moving forward. And so, it wasn't something that I've always had. And when I first did my coach training almost 6 years ago, I realized that this was definitely a path for me. I knew hands down. I didn't know specifically who I was going to be working with. But what I learned in my first 2 years is that as I coached people, because I think I was more of a generalist coach in the very beginning, and I do the quote unquote life coaching. And so when I worked with people who were just in a general sense looking for help, I don't feel like I was impactful as when I was talking to someone about their business and how they wanted to help people. And I started to realize that just really magical, divine things happen. Like, guides were sending information, ideas would come in really, really special ways, and we would just explode together. And it was really, really special. So that's why I say I feel like some of it is really divine, and that's me finding, my dharma and my purpose to guide people to build businesses around the things that they love to do.
I love that you mention these ways of knowing that you just know, right? It's that you're essentially, you're getting information from somewhere. It sounds to me like you are listening deeply and that and very broadly as you deal with people, and you are open to knowing things in non-linear, non-provable ways as you talk about guidance. That for someone for whom guidance, or this idea of getting information from just the ether, like that which surrounds us, or for using some kind of an intuitive sense that's beyond our typical 5 senses ways of knowing, I'd like for you to share a little bit about how you cultivate that ability, because it sounds like you have a handle on the connection between intuition and mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. And I think, obviously for me, it's a regular yoga practice. It's a lot of meditation.
Yeah.
I'll be straight up. any gifts that I've had have been accelerated by meditation, which we all know, but for some reason it's just so hard to do it because our society teaches us that doing is better than being. And so passive investments in, sitting and listening and not taking action and not reading a book don't have any value.
So that's the yang addiction again, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's totally not valuing the just sitting there. It's like, what's the point? I'm not feeling stressed out. I don't need that. But there is such a power in deepening that groove, and that's the cities, right? Like SIDDHI, right? That notion of magic powers that yogis acquire. They're not so magical. They're just a cultivated skill that people have worked on for decades.
But I think it's a mashup of a bunch of different things. I mean, I think it's definitely having a clean temple, right? Eating clean foods, which I wish I could say I did every day, but I know the periods that I do eat really, really healthy and clean, everything flows better. So that's definitely one.
Oh, yeah.
Practice, like a stillness practice in addition to exercise, like some sort of, yoga. I don't really do Qigong, but I know a lot of people that do really, really love it. So I think that serves us in a similar way. Meditation, but then also I think a lot of it just comes with experience, having those conversations over and over again and not just expecting it to come the first time, and then having a dialogue with people. And so if you're really, really looking to hone in on, is this intuition working in this moment, stop the situation and check in with the other person and say, and I did this a lot in the beginning when I started coaching, which was, you know what, I'm really getting a sense of, you need to be eating more green bananas. And, you'll notice in the other person say, oh, you know what, you're right. I actually have been thinking about green bananas lately, and so just checking in and presencing the gift or presencing the thought or the intuition with that other person. And that allows you to do a couple things. To just be really aware of what's going on in that moment and to test it with that other person. And that will allow you to trust it and use it a little bit more so that now down the road, years later, I know it's true because I've been able to not test it to see if it was true, but to just cultivate it and be more conscious of it.
So really just checking it out, just making it explicit and saying, here's the impression I'm getting. True? Not true? Or like, how does that feel?
Yeah. And, and I think it's a great tool too, as well, to be a humble leader and to not feel like you want to have all the answers. Cause by far I don't, right? When I work with a client, I'm coaching them, which doesn't mean that I'm not a consultant. I don't sit down and tell them exactly what they need to do. We come through to those answers through a dance, through a conversation, through me suggesting things and them coming back. They own their life, right? They don't just sit and take away everything that I tell them to do. And so, I think it's important to keep that humbleness and to really check in with your clients at all times.
Absolutely, right. Coaching isn't really about being prescriptive so much as it is helping to draw out from the person, help kind of excavate the person underneath whatever limiting beliefs there are and whatever kind of constraints that we've put on ourselves.
Yeah. And the other thing, Brodie, if I can share, the other thing that I've learned over the years, this I didn't know when I was younger, but now at 42, it took me a long time to figure this lesson out. When there are people, and this is in a business sense or just in, a social, personal sense, when there's people that I'm really not turned off of, but I really find like I want to back away from them, it's not really who they are. It's the fact that what is coming out of their mouth is incongruent with who they are or how they're acting in the moment. And so now that I've realized that, it's not, I don't question myself like, what am I doing wrong? Why is this conversation not going well? Or why are we not getting along? Or why does this person not like me? Like we always want to take it to our own lesson or make it be about us. But really what I've learned over the years is when I feel turned off by someone, it's often, more often than not, an incongruency in them. And so if you can really, really be courageous and walk through that with them, powerful things can happen through that too.
Do you mean by walk through that with them? Do you mean point it out and call them on it?
Yeah. And, from a place of love, obviously, but, in a coaching conversation, I would say, do you know what I'm hearing that you love XYZ, but what I'm seeing is something totally contrast in your actions of doing this, this, and this. Can you help me understand that more? Would it be okay to explore this a bit? Because I'd like to get clear on it.
Oh, and that's really where the biggest, hardest, nastiest lessons lie.
Absolutely. Because quite often they're not even conscious about it either. So, I joke sometimes that I have a BS detector, and I think I've always had it, but I just didn't recognize what it was. And so now that I have the courage to use it, good things always happen when I'm able to.
What's your growing edge right now?
Oh, that's a good question. It's for me, the number one thing. I feel like I'm in a place where my business is kind of set and everything is established. This year was a year of big edges for me, of, building my first online program and, launching a podcast and getting to my 1 year mark. I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate having a podcast.
Congratulations. That's
awesome. Thank you. Yeah, my podversary. So that was a big commitment for me. So the number one thing for me is just scaling and staying consistent. And so that seems odd, but it is an answer to your question, which is not going over edges is my edge, because I'm a leaper and I love new. I'm addicted to the edge.
I can relate to that as well.
So if you're, I see with entrepreneurs, they're typically one extreme or the other. They're either so focused or they're so terrified of moving forward, they're stuck, or they're so addicted to the edge, they want to launch new things or try new things or go somewhere different every week. And so for me, the edgy behavior is, Julie, like, you've built all the stuff, now just sit with it and grow it. And so that's
right. Like it from that kind of yoga Ayurveda standpoint, right? Like you don't want to be too dispersing, like too vata deranged, right? Like having going in too many directions is exhausting, and that being able to have that focus, that stay the course, even though the new is exciting, if you want to actually move in a given direction, that needs to get the energy, which means subtraction has to happen in order for focus to happen, which is challenging.
Yeah. So fine tuning, that's definitely where my edge is in this coming year.
Well, good luck with that. That is a worthy goal. I think you will have yoga to fall back on to help you with that.
Yeah. And it's, it's just that thing when you're doing something new, the energy behind it is just so incredible. And, you're just so addicted to that. And so this is going to be a big learning year for me. And I'm hoping that a lot of my clients and people in my community will learn from that too, just watching what my journey is. Because I think, it took me a long time to figure this one out too. And so I feel like a lot of people aren't even aware of where they sit in that spectrum and how this might even be a problem that faces them. I call it the unconscious pivot. Like we're constantly changing what it is we want. Oh, well, if I just create this, then I'll be successful, or then the money will flow. And it's like, actually, no, you need to stay and go deep, 1 inch wide and 1 mile deep.
Awesome advice. And so apart from having a practice, is there anything else that you recommend that people do in order to scale those depths?
I think the biggest thing for me is about accountability, because, I might say, okay, well, I'm going to not do a retreat this year because I have too many things on the go in terms of what I've launched already. But every once in a while, I catch myself trying to book venues. And so, so for me, just the discipline of saying to people in my mastermind group, you know what, I'm actually not going to do this. And I need you guys to hold me accountable to that for the next 5 months, unless XYZ happens or whatever that milestone happens to be. So I find accountability, and it's not just having someone else guide your rules. It's about making a commitment and saying it out loud.
Saying it out loud, saying it publicly, saying it to at least a few other people who believe that you can do it differently. It can be so important in making it like less abstract and something that you can go back on.
Mm-hmm.
I try to do that with my patients as well. It's like, I'll say, okay, you can shoot me an email and tell me how your changing this new habit went. And like a lot of times I don't even have to respond to that email, but just that person knowing that they were going to have to report in helped them to change their behavior and stick with a new habit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Julie, this has been really cool and interesting. If people want to stay in touch with you, how can they do that?
The best thing is to head over to my website. So it's thecorporateyogi.com. We chatted about wanting to have some sort of gift for your listeners, which I think is really cool. So I'm sure a lot of them have a meditation practice, but what I would love to share is a little mini course that I have. It's called Meditation 101, but there's a couple teachable videos. There's a guided meditation with me for 5 minutes if somebody wants to start doing that as part of their day. And then there's a little worksheet that they can do to really focus on taking that 30 days and doing their meditation practice every day. And for those of your listeners who already have a regular meditation practice, maybe it's adding a second one in the afternoon or before bed. I find my afternoon meditations are always of a very different energy than first thing in the morning. So
it's really true.
So if anybody's interested in that, what I'll do is I'll put that on my site so they can go to thecorporateyogi.com/a-healthy-curiosity and they can download it there.
Well, thank you. That's super generous. And I hope that people take advantage of that. For people that might not even know this, I actually have giveaways on my site. I have a little Qigong thing and a little meditation thing as an opt-in to hear from me via my newsletter. So if anyone out there in podcast land would like those resources, I've got them as well. And you can go to brodiewelch.com for those. Anyway, Julie, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I feel like we could have easily talked for another 2 hours around both of our backgrounds. There's so much. I know we're doing completely different things in our businesses, but it feels like we're both coming from that same place and have a lot of the same beliefs.
Absolutely. Well, authenticity, the desire to serve, the yoga background, all of that, there's a ton of overlap there, and maybe we can figure out another conversation to have further down the road.
Absolutely. I'd love that.
Great. Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodiewelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.